Okay, the next step is that we need to connect my bind skeleton. So if I hide my IK and my FK skeletons here, you can see my bind skeleton is not connected to anything. There's no channels on this guy. What I need to do is basically make it so that my bind skeleton now follows both my IK and my FK, and then I'm going to create my switch. So it allows me to switch between the two of them. So I'm going to switch back on my IK and FK controls here so I can see them. You can see how easy it is if you make those joints a bit bigger so you can see where they are. So I'm going to pick this using the outliner rather than trying to pick the joints manually, because it can be a little bit tricky to try and pick them in the right order, and some of those joints can be a bit hard to select. So it's easier if we do it here in the outliner. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my IK and then my FK and then my bind skeleton, and I'm going to do my parent constraints, my orientation constraints that way. So I'm going to choose IK wrist, hold down the control key, FK wrist, and then bind skeleton wrist. And I'm going to constrain, make an orientation constraint with maintain offset, and just hit apply. Okay, and then I'm going to do IK elbow, FK elbow, bind elbow, and I think my rotate Y is locked there, so I'm just going to tick the rotate Y and then just hit apply, just rotate Y, and you can see down here it's made the two joints, they're both set to 1, so they're blending, it's half and half. And then finally shoulder, IK, shoulder, FK, shoulder, shoulder joint, and then hit apply. And I'm just going to undo that because I want to get all the axes. I just had that Y tick, so I need to constrain all axes and hit apply. Cool. And so what happens now is if I move my IK control out here, you can see it sort of splits the difference between these two. Right, so it's like kind of half and halfway between this control and what this control is doing, and that's because these constraints have both got a value of 1. So if they're just basically halving each other's values, so it's like 50-50 each. If I was to come here and make one of these values 0, it'll snap over to that particular control. So now that I've got that, I'm going to bring these guys back to 0. Set this one, and this is an important thing to do as well, it's just to make sure everything's set to 0, rotation set to 0 on all of these before we do the next step. Okay, that's looking good. And then what I need to do is create a switch that lets me switch between these two controls. Okay, now I'm going to come in here I've got a little IK switch here. I'm going to go modify, add an attribute, and just going to come over here. I'm just going to call this IK FK switch. I'm going to give that a value of 0 to 10, default of 0, and hit add. Close that, and that just gives me an empty value that's going to basically be my IK FK switch. So at 0 I want my IK handle to be in control, and at 10 I want my FK setup to be in control. So now what I'll do is I'll come into window, I'll come into animate, set driven key set, and I'll bring that up over here. I want this I over here to be the driver, so I'm going to select that and load that as the driver. And the things that I want to be driven are my constraints. So the constraints that are on my bind skeleton. So I'm going to hide these guys, the constraints that are on these guys, right? And so to get to them, I just can simply grab them in the outliner, wrist constraint, elbow constraint, shoulder constraint, and load those as my driven. So IK switch is the driver. Its value of IK, I just need to make sure that's selected. And then under each of these, we've got these values here, IK, FK. So what I want to have happen is I want to make sure that when this value is set to 0, my IK is in full control. So IK switch, IK, FK switch, 0, wrist, and then I'm going to shift select both of these guys. So when I key them, I get both of them. I'll set my FK to 0 and my IK to 1 and hit key. And I'll get a fatal error. Hang on a second, guys. I'll retrieve that, and then I'll get back to where we were. Hi everyone, sorry about that. So I just had some performance anxiety there, and it crashed. So I'll make sure I'll just go back and grab my IK controls and load those as the driven. And I've got my IK switch here. So what I want to do, as I was saying before, and it has actually remembered to set that key for me. So it has set a key on both these guys, and then I'm going to come down here to the elbow. Grab both of those. I want the FK to be at 0. Now I've got to have both these highlighted, so I'm keying both of them at the same time. Hit key so they both go orange. grab the shoulder, select both of those, and I want that one to be 0, and then I'm going to click key. Okay, great. Now the other thing I want to do, next thing I want to do is when my IK handle switch, this one here, is set to 10, I want the FK controls to be in charge. So I'm going to come into this guy, grab these two, and I find this is the best way to work with the set driven keys. Just be really methodical with it, because there's no feedback about whether or not it's actually worked. Key that one, grab these two guys, swap these over, 0, 1, key, shoulder, 0, 1. And I'm going to make sure I've got both of those selected, otherwise it won't work. So shift to select both of those, and then hit key. Now if I bring back my IK skeleton, I'm currently in, so switch it to IK mode, so 0, and my IK skeleton should be driving, and it's not. Set it to 10. Okay, so it looks like 10 sets my IK skeleton to work. That's okay. So IK skeleton is working now, and if I set this to 0, my FK skeleton is the one that's taking over, and that's the one that's now driving. And the only other thing to do here is just to make life a little bit more convenient for us and make things a little bit cleaner. I'm just going to come in here and just hide these two joint chains that we don't need to see, so the FK and the IK skeleton. In fact, yep, so we'll just kind of hide those guys. So they're hidden. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set up my set driven key controls. Oh, just keep those guys hidden. Hiding them. Just move that back to 0. So that when my IK switches on and off, it also hides my control curves for these guys. So I'm going to load in, so IK FK switch, and I'm going to load in these two nodes here, which has my control group for my IK and my control group for my FK. I'm going to load, so IK switch, and grab these two guys, load those as the driven, and I want their visibility to be the thing that I'm keying on and off. So when IK switch is set to 0, which we realize is going to actually be FK, I want the IK group to be hidden. So I'm going to grab his visibility and key him on. FK group, key that one, come in here, I'm just going to key that off and hit key. And when the IK switch is set to 10, I would like IK group visibility to be 1 and FK group visibility to be 0. And then I'm going to key that on. And so now when my FK controls are showing, if I switch this and I drag it between the two, now my IK controls have complete control. And switching it back to my FK controls. And it looks like I haven't keyed that properly with my set driven key, so I need to come in here and just make sure I do that again. So I'm going to grab my IK control, visibility, and my IK switch is set to 10. I'm wanting to key on my IK control group, so visibility needs to be 1, needs to be on, and then I hit key. And now there we go. So now it's flicking between the two different groups. And I'll set all these guys back to 0. And just check that the FK group is set to 0. So grab those two controls, set their rotation to 0. And the last thing I'm going to do is just connect these back up to the skeleton. I'm just going to make another quick video to show you how to do that.